for joining us. On behalf of the Philadelphia Financial Exploitation Prevention Task Force, I welcome you to our World Elder Abuse Awareness Day event at 2022. My name is Joe Snyder, and I'm the co-founder of the task force, along with Linda Mill, who's online. When we were in different jobs, I was with Philadelphia Corporation for the Aging. Linda was with Wachovia Bank. She's now with Allied Bank. And I'm also the public policy chair of the National Adult Protective Services Association and a member of the Financial Exploitation Advisory Board. Our task force was founded in 2012 and brings together many disciplines to work together to do our best to educate and protect victims of financial exploitation. Our task force started with including adult protective services, financial institutions, law enforcement, medical, legal, advocacy organizations, and others. And we educate, train, and put on events. We do yearly events. They're usually in person. The last couple of years, of course, we've all been online. We look forward so much to being in person again. We've had events all around the city. And there are World Elder Abuse Awareness Days all around the world. There's plenty going on in the country, but there's many in the world. I was privileged to be a participant in the first World Elder Abuse Awareness Day at the United Nations in 2006. And the Financial Exploitation Advisory Board of the National Adult Protective Services Association has now taken over the international function, and we had our 8th Global Summit yesterday. And doing pretty much what we're doing today, educating and giving you information to help you protect yourself. Yeah, it's always interesting. In fact, yesterday had a real interesting session on the Transnational Elder Fraud Task Force, and got an education about cryptocurrency, which I was not very aware of, and was not surprised to learn that the crypto has really exploded, especially in the last 2 years. And 1 out of every $4 invested in crypto is lost to fraud. And last year, 46,000 people reported losses of over $1 billion. And although it's mostly a younger person's game, and the people in the 30-year-olds are really using crypto more as other forms of exploitation, when an older person or a person 70 and older is involved, the average loss is much higher, in this case, 5 times as high as the 30-year-olds. The other reason we do that is because we know that the scammers and the people, professional people going after the money, know where the money is. The American Banking Association put out their report last year, protecting seniors, that people 50 and older control 61% of the bank accounts and over 70% of the deposits in the United States. And from the security side, the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, known as SIFMA, in their 2020 report said that Americans over 50 account for 77% of the assets in this country. Yesterday, one of our first speakers was Carl Pillimer, who was from Cornell University, one of the early researchers in the field. And I always liked one of his early quotes where he said, "Elder abuse is likely the most widespread problem of older people that is largely preventable, unlike many disease and conditions of older age." And that's what we're here today to do, to educate you, to help with prevention. Task Force is proud to do this, and today you'll be hearing information on why we become vulnerable when we age, how financial institutions respond to signs of financial exploitation and cognitive decline, the importance and the utility of the trusted contact, steps you can take to protect yourself, how protective services works, best practices for financial planning, and you will be able to explore some of your best legal options. All the materials that are referenced today will be sent out in an email to everybody, so look for that to come. And it's a pleasure. Again, thank you so much for taking time to be here. And I'm going to turn it over to Dana Goldberg.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our event. My name is Dana Goldberg. I'm the legal director at SeniorLAW Center, and I've been a task force participant for 10 years. We're going to start off by going to the medical point of view to bring up some issues. And Estevana Isaac, the clinical fellow for cognitive and behavior psychology at Penn Medicine and the Penn Memory Center, is going to kick off our informational session.
Hi, I'm Dr. Estevana Isaac. I am the Penn Memory Center Cognitive and Behavioral Neurology Fellow. And today we are going to talk about elder abuse. And in talking about elder abuse, we are first going to discuss what is a vulnerable elder. A vulnerable elder is an older adult with a cognitive impairment that renders them unable to arrange for adequate self-care and protection. So in 2005, 41% of older adults with Medicare benefits actually had difficulty performing activities of daily living and needed some type of paid or unpaid support from caregivers. So as you can imagine, we're estimating about 41% of the Medicare community would be considered a vulnerable elder or would qualify for that definition. So what is elder abuse? Elder abuse in a systematic review back in 2015 was included physical abuse, neglect, self-neglect, and financial exploitation. And what they found in that study is that 10% of cognitively intact older adults reported elder abuse. However, when you're looking at patients who are diagnosed with dementia, meaning some type of cognitive impairment that impacts their activities of daily living, that number increased significantly to 47%. So like I said, once you're considered a vulnerable elder, that risk for elder abuse increases. And while there is an increased reliance on empathy to drive decisions, many older adults are reluctant to actually report elder abuse or neglect out of fear of being removed from their homes or implicating family members. There are studies that find that 90% of these cases of elder abuse actually involve family members, either a spouse or an adult child. So like I said before, some of the risk factors include dementia, which is a cognitive impairment that impacts activities of daily living, mainly because they often don't recognize or remember these offenses. As you get older, there is a decline in executive function, which is normal executive function, meaning the ability to develop a plan, adapt to circumstances, and implement that plan. And that does ultimately affect your decision-making capabilities. Like I said before, 10% of cognitively intact older adults were also, victims of elder abuse. Other things to keep other things to consider is social isolation and depression. So social isolation, feelings of loneliness, when someone calls you and, you really want to encourage that conversation, mainly because you're looking for company or looking for someone to talk to. Otherwise, that person on the other line, on the other side of the phone, is looking to scam you. So it's definitely a recipe for exploitation, financial exploitation in that context. Depression, late-night depression is not uncommon in older adults, and it can cause like a loss of capacity for self-care and protection. And that also increases your risk of elder abuse. And just keep in mind that lower education and income levels have been associated with neglect and emotional abuse as well. So some of the warning signs, primarily for financial exploitation, is just the changes in the ability for an older adult to pay for services that they previously could afford. So that includes medications, utility, housing, or food. And this can sometimes be difficult to detect in patients who are diagnosed with dementia, mainly because you do need someone there to help with managing finances. But if there is an uneven distribution of wealth within the home, then that can be an indication that, someone is taking advantage of, their ability to, they're taking advantage or financially exploiting that older adult. Other things to keep in mind is just a high caregiver burden can, lead to a lot of unmanageable stress, depression, anxiety, and there can be a lot of miscommunication that comes with that. Also, just having so much responsibility, it increases the likelihood that there is going to be some neglect in the picture. So always ask directly about abuse in all contexts. Some signs of neglect that we can detect within the clinic is just malnutrition, dehydration, and pressure ulcers. So what can we do? So as healthcare workers, social workers, community agencies, they're all there to assure the safety of at-risk older adults. So definitely tell anyone who could be in those roles, who are in those roles, to help with that situation. There can be a home visit by a nurse or another clinician who can assist with determining is there elder abuse going on in that home or within that facility. And reporting suspected elder abuse or neglect to government agencies allows them to do a more thorough investigation. So even if you're not really sure, make sure that you report it just so there is a thorough investigation that does happen. The main government agencies that cover these cases are the Adult Protective Services for community dwelling older adults, and LTCOP, which is for adults living in facilities. So if you go to the National Center on Elder Abuse website, which is listed here, there is a list of phone numbers to report suspected abuse case by state. So it's a different number for each state. So definitely look at that website to ensure that you have the right number for your state. LTCOP also has a website itself where you can report, where you can find that information as well for older adults living in facilities. And listed here are the references for this presentation. And I will be available at the end of this presentation to answer any additional questions that you may have. Thank you for your time.
So we thank Penn Memory and Estevana Isaac for that. And we're going to turn over now to the financial industry side to hear from James McCrae, Head of Investor Protection for Vanguard Retail Investor Group.
Hello, my name is James McCrae, and I lead Vanguard's investor protection team, which focuses on protecting our firm's senior and vulnerable investors. I would like to start by saying thank you for attending today's session marking World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I am honored to be speaking with you all about the critically important topic of financial exploitation. I'm going to cover what financial exploitation is, some of the common warning signs, as well as best practices and tips and tricks that you can implement for yourselves or others in your life who may be at risk for financial exploitation. To start, I want to give you a definition of what financial exploitation is, and this one's a little technical, but financial exploitation is the illegal or improper use of a vulnerable adult's assets through theft, fraud, scams, or any act of omission to obtain control through deception, intimidation, or undue influence over a specified adult's money, assets, or property. To put that simply, it is the theft of somebody's assets. Why do firms like Vanguard focus on financial exploitation? And we know that our investors have worked hard to accumulate their savings, and as clients age, the ability to replace those assets becomes more and more challenging should a large loss occur. We know that it is in our clients' best interest to make sure that they are protected from bad actors who do not have their financial interests in mind, and to help them ensure that the money that they have saved throughout their lives is used for their benefit, not someone else's through coercion or exploitation. We also know through reports from agencies like the FTC and the FBI The exploitation of senior Americans continues to increase year over year, and it is up to all of us here today to try and help raise awareness through education to stem this ongoing crisis. To help prevent or identify concerns of exploitation, firms like Vanguard train our representatives to be on the lookout for warning signs that something may not be right and empower them to escalate concerns of exploitation and fraud. In an effort to help firms with these efforts, FINRA, which is our regulatory body, the regulator that oversees firms like Vanguard, introduced rules back in 2018 that provide institutions with the ability to hit the pause button on disbursements or transactions if we have reasonable belief that exploitation or fraud has, or may be occurring. It also gives firms the ability to reach out to someone who you choose to name as your trusted contact if we have concerns with potential exploitation or cognitive decline. We'll cover a little bit more about trusted contact here in a minute. These rules were enacted because firms like Vanguard or whatever firm you choose to invest with, they have an intimate knowledge of your finances and a unique point of view to observe when something seems off or out of character. These rules give us the ability to delay your transactions while we get a chance to investigate a little bit further. You know, one of the common questions we get here is who are perpetrating these crimes? Who are responsible for these types of actions? And unfortunately, that is a really broad swath of characters. You know, we have our more traditional scammers, strangers that people meet online or through other forms where it's a new person in their life, whether they think it's a new romantic partner or a new friend they meet through the internet. That's really been on the rise throughout the COVID pandemic as more and more people have moved to online channels to meet new people, including seniors. But it doesn't just stop there. There's also family members who, you know, sometimes children who live with a parent might be responsible for this type of thing. Sometimes even people that the investors have given their trust to by naming power of attorney or put in place as their caregiver. That is also an avenue in which exploitation can occur. What's really important is not so much who is the perpetrator, but what are the warning signs? What can you be on the lookout for to make sure that if something starts to come up, you're ready to step in and be aware. Some of those signs that we've seen are, you know, are new requests that really seem frantic or extremely time sensitive. Wiring or redeeming large amounts of money when that's not been a normal pattern or normal activity. Secrecy around the need of funds, right? Your firm has a fiduciary responsibility to understand your assets and the use of your assets. And when there's new secrecy, when it's I can't tell you why, those really raise red flags to financial institutions. Some other signs of undue influence can be a family member or a caretaker who is all of a sudden take excessive interest in finances, or where you become reluctant to discuss financial matters when previously that was pretty normal, because that's usually a sign that somebody may be kind of pulling the strings or having some influence over a vulnerable adult. Also, you know, we talked a little bit about power of attorney abuse. That can really be demonstrated by where the power of attorney or the agent starts using the client's assets for themselves, for things that appear to be personal expenses. They make statements like, the client is loaning me this money, or I need this money to pay bills or purchase or remodel a home or buy a car, maybe when the investor themselves, whose money it is, can't drive anymore. These are all kind of some common warning signs we may be on the lookout for. We also have listed here a list of common scams, right? While we're talking about this, scams are on the rise continuously, whether they be romance scams, right? We see a lot of investors who maybe their spouse has passed away a few years ago. They're getting back into the dating world and they're meeting new people online. And sometimes those people aren't who they seem to be. Inheritance or lottery scams, where there's a promise of a large payout if only a small initial tax is paid or investment is paid. These are all kind of some common warning signs. And we've attached a brochure to our presentation today that will go into those into more detail for your education. Next thing I want to spend some time talking about today is trusted contact. So trusted contact, we mentioned a little bit earlier, was a rule put in place by FINRA that allows and requires actually financial institutions to ask you to name an emergency contact on your investments account. just like you would when you go to the doctor's office. This is the number one thing we ask our investors to do to help them protect themselves. It's a lifeline so that if concerns do arise, if there is something that we are concerned about, we want to understand more about, and we maybe aren't getting answers from you, or we're concerned that things might be happening to our client, it's an impartial party we can reach out to learn more. And like I said, it's that lifeline for your financial institution. What's really great about that is this is not somebody who gets information about your accounts. They're not going to know how much you have, how long you've been here, what you're invested in. It is strictly somebody you name who can be there to be an anchor, to be a support for you should we have concerns. You can also talk with your financial institution about other various levels of authority you can establish. Like we said, a trusted contact is not somebody who can take action, is not somebody who can act on your behalf, but you can add that person, right? So if you have a trusted family member, a trusted friend, an attorney, and anybody who you maybe trust to have access to your accounts to support you, would highly encourage you to talk to your financial institution about that as well. I want to close out here with, again, some tips and tricks, some best practices that you can start to utilize. First, as we just covered, add a trusted contact. This really is the number one way where you're not giving up any control, you're not giving up any information, but you're giving that contact just in case something goes wrong. We also really encourage you to be aware of what common scams or signs of exploitation are. Like I said, we'll attach the brochure to the presentation. Also, a resource I would point you to is FTC.gov, the Federal Trade Commission. That's the best way to keep up to date on what is going on in the country and what are the most common scams that they're seeing people get hit with today. Some really great best practices as more and more accounts move online and your interaction with your firms is on the web. We encourage you to practice good cybersecurity hygiene. Don't open links that you're not expecting. Don't give out your personal information to people you meet online, and make sure your computers are up to date on virus software, malware detection. Those are just really great standard best practices. Also, be vigilant. Review your statements for transactions. Review all mail that comes to you. If somebody's stolen your identity and opening up accounts, you may get that mail. These are all things that you should be on the lookout for. And report anything unauthorized or suspicious is taking place. Also, be aware of unknown calls or texts. We know that the phone is a great way that scammers can get in touch with people, can take advantage of folks. And by making sure that you're being diligent about what you answer, what you give information-wise to people that are calling you, we would highly encourage that. To close out, want to give you a best practice of, if you suspect somebody that you or somebody may be the victim of financial exploitation, would encourage you to contact the appropriate financial services company, whether that's yours or your loved ones. Contact local law enforcement. They're there to help, as well as the adult protective service agencies in your area. They are great partners who can get you the resources needed to help make sure that exploitation is addressed. And the sooner you report it, the sooner you take action, the better. So I'd like to close out by just saying thank you again for having us, and hopefully this was informative. Looking forward to joining you at the Q&A at the end of today's session, along with my colleague, John Janelli, who has been instrumental in standing up this program at Vanguard and influencing the direction that we're taking this. So thank you again, and really excited to meet with you all later.
And thank you to James for that informative presentation. And we're now going to move on to a little different perspective to hear from Christine Moriarty, certified financial planner and the founder of moneypiece.com, where her focus is the intersection of emotions, behavior, and money.
Hello, thanks for having me on this seminar. I am going to speak. My name is Christine Moriarty, first of all, and I have had over 30 years experience working with individual clients. I am now a speaker and writer, and this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as I've had many family members go through this and I've helped them along the road, and I've had many clients. So looking at protecting your finances through a financial planning lens is both personal and professional for me. So I have some aspects that will help you out and look at it differently, as well as include what some of the previous speakers have spoken about. So I'm going to share my screen so you can be looking at the same slides I have. A lot of the details that I present will be on the handout that you got from Penn State. And I know we'll have time for questions at the end. So this is going to be through the financial planner's holistic approach and lens on protecting your finances. What we know as experienced people with memory loss and the medical community knows is that executive function is the first to go as we age, or if there's a stroke. And executive function, money management is an executive function. And what happens is so many people are quiet, that's a euphemism, about their own money. Like they don't talk to other people about money. Or in the case of the older generation, a lot of, maybe it was the man in the family that took care of the finances and he doesn't want to share it or give up control. Maybe it was the woman who always paid the bills, or as a single person or as a spouse. And no one wants to give up something they've taken care of all of their life. So we want to be aware that it may go and people may or may not know about it, but we can work with them in several different ways without having pinpointing or taking everything away. So the four areas I want to talk about today are spending, both credit cards, cash, all those ways, credit, using that credit card as well as our credit reports, solicitations, and how to create a team effort to really help our loved ones manage this money so in a way that helps them in the long run. Spending. If you want to help someone with their spending, first you need to understand their system. If they are remiss or don't want to give it up, maybe you just ask them how they manage their money so that you can learn from them a better way. Or maybe if you're the person who has mild cognitive impairment, you start to tell someone how you manage your money so that they see there's a system. Or you write down which bills come out of which account and when your payments come in from an IRA or from a pension. Those kind of things are very helpful. If you're helping someone review their debts and payments, the same if you're willing to at least write them down so there's tracking and there is a future ability to understand how the money flows. Because often I see clients get really frustrated if someone has passed away or if they're helping someone who became ill and they don't know anything about what payments come, where money comes in, how money is spent. So if we take the time to look at these two areas, we can then make changes appropriately because we know things change over time and we don't really have a roadmap. So on the spending, it's important to not upset someone's system because we all like to manage money in the same way and have a routine, and even more so during a progressive disease. The other thing is credit. Now, one thing about everyone always thinks of credit cards or how we spend our money or how that looks. What you need to know is you can put credit limits on credit cards. So if up until this point, someone has had 2 credit cards, maybe you do reduce a credit card so that there's only one, and take the time to reduce the limit to something that's manageable. Credit cards love people who have been very attentive in paying their bills. You want to make sure that you lower, rather than have them raise the credit to $12,000, $15,000, $25,000, you can actually lower the credit limit to $250. It's a way to manage some of the risk associated with memory loss. That is a huge piece. Again, not taking away a credit card right away, but adjusting what can be spent. You can do the same on an ATM card that only has a limit of $100 or $50 can be taken out each time, because that's what this disease is about, is loss. And as this loss, it can include money. As our memory fades, we want to make sure that there are some restrictions and limitations. A huge thing is to check someone's credit report. Repeatedly, I hear from clients that, oh, I didn't know my mom had this bill or that bill that could be something that they have been paying on. And on a credit report, it lists everything, the past history. It also would list some funny things, like I know on my mom's credit report was a phone, a landline in Miami, Florida. And my mother had never lived in Miami, Florida. So it was evident to me that there was some identity theft out there, and it was worthy to note on a credit report. Also consider a credit freeze. And I recommend this to almost everybody. A credit freeze in most states is free, and you freeze your credit so that no one can check it unless you release it ahead of time to them. So that means that you get a code, it's frozen. All those places that want to give extend your credit certainly can check and see you have good credit. However, if you go to buy a car and you need credit for the car, you have to then release your credit report in order to buy the car. It's not a huge hassle like some people anticipate. However, it can protect the worst of things. I gave this talk to a professional financial planning group, and someone came up at the end and shared afterwards that he couldn't help his mother when she actually went out and bought a car, a Cadillac, he clearly said, and she didn't even have a license. She had used credit to buy the car, but because she had signed the documents and was not declared incompetent, that credit was extended on the car, and she owned the car that she couldn't drive anymore. So a credit freeze really can serve you in so many ways, and it can certainly prevent identity theft for everybody, which is why it's high on my credit recommendations. So another key area is solicitations. We all know that people, when you're home, love to get US mail. People love to get email. Those kind of things can be blocked. So again, on the handout is all the information, but you can also go online and find the places to discontinue getting solicitations in the US mail. I don't know of one from email at this point, but I know that each email service, whether you have Gmail or Outlook, has ways of blocking things you don't want or putting them in the trash. And the less information coming into someone who's overwhelmed, the less they're going to make a poor decision. The same with the phone. You can use a national service that's free. Don't ever pay for either the mail or the phone. A national service that will allow blocks on your phone. You know, this happens again. My friend David was home with his family, and his mother kept getting phone calls, and he said she would get about 8 phone calls a day of solicitations. And he started just picking up the phone and saying, don't call back. I told him that doesn't solve all of the problems, that to make sure he does this phone do not call service, which he did do. And he said the next time he went home, there was only one or two calls, and he let them know his mother was on do not call. So they had been reduced. There's also pyramid schemes. I have heard of an elderly gentleman through his grandson who ran an empire, for lack of a better word, a large real estate holdings, had done very well financially. And at the last few years of his life, as he aged and became less capable, he got wrapped up in a pyramid scheme. But because of his patriarchal nature, none of his family knew it because he wasn't sharing any information about his financial life. So there's all sorts of other frauds, and we've heard them about people claiming to be family members and seeking money, having to wire money to people and then it's gone. So be sure that solicitations, you protect yourself and loved ones against solicitations. This is a team effort. I don't want you to think you have to do this alone. One is financial planners can help. Two is the bank can help. Well, I have a friend who manages a bank, and she says, we are the first line of defense because we see people all the time or can read the historical habits around checking and savings. And so if something's off, we catch it. So making people around your loved one aware of this financial issue that could come up because of some medical issues, then that helps you breathe a little bit of sign of relief and know there's a team out there. And please don't think you have to do this all at once. I make a lot of recommendations in this short time we have together. And definitely on the handout, there is recommendations. But do take it piecemeal and make sure you chip away at some of these important things. I want to supply some professional services. If you look at this list, there's elder care services, there's geriatric care managers, there's local senior centers. Excuse me. One of the best things I've found for clients is daily money managers who work with people to help them manage their money and balance the checkbook. So you don't have to take it on, and there's someone objective working with a client. And there's elder care attorneys and CPAs, of course. I always love sharing this picture of my dad with one of his visiting nurses. He was in great shape, but as he wound down, he needed more and more help. And gradually, he stepped in the right direction by getting that help, both physical and mental. But sometimes it just takes a lot more encouragement and support even to ask for help. And we can all relate to that, I think. There's educational resources on the left here. I have a list of some of the books that I like and appreciate the best, from The Forgetting to Still Alice, to the classic, The 36-Hour Day, to the new one, The Problem of Alzheimer's by Dr. Kalowish. And then there is a movie, Alive Inside, and that just can be helpful to see that, remind us that someone is inside and how helpful music can be. In summary, I want you to refer to that UPenn Memory Center handout. Build your team around your financial life and around helping your loved one around their financial life. If this is not your strong point, find someone who it is, like a daily care manager or a CPA with a bookkeeper on their staff. Over time, you can make this happen. This isn't something that happens overnight, nor is the disease overnight typically. So you can ease into it and help what you need, get that information on what you need. You can also refer to my website, because I have been studying and working with this issue of memory and money for over 15 years. Again, because it's near and dear to my heart, and because of clients, and there's resources on there. I thank you for your time this afternoon, and I really look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Christine. So now we're going to pivot a little bit back to what Estevana Isaac had discussed in terms of older adult protective services and the role that organization plays here in Pennsylvania. We're going to hear from Jen Spoeri, the Executive Director for the National Adult Protective Services Association.
My name is Jennifer Spoeri, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Adult Protective Services Association, or NAPSA. I want to first thank you for inviting me to speak briefly from a national perspective on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. NAPSA is a national nonprofit 501c3 organization with members in all 50 states. Formed in 1989, our goal is to provide adult protective services programs a forum for sharing information, solving problems, and improving the quality of services for victims of elder and vulnerable adult mistreatment. APS investigates allegations of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation, and provides services to mitigate or remove the risk facing the adult. Self-determination is at the foundation of all services provided through APS. NAPSA's mission is to strengthen the capacity of APS at the national, state, and local levels to effectively and efficiently recognize, report, and respond to the needs of elders and adults with disabilities who are the victims of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and to prevent such abuse whenever possible. So how can APS support caregivers and older adults to protect themselves from financial exploitation? APS across the country continues to be integral members of multidisciplinary teams and task forces, such as this one here in Philadelphia. These task forces are instrumental in creating relationships and cross-training across disciplines. Each member of a task force, whether local, state, or national, have individual skills and tools that can be used collectively and collaboratively to prevent or stop abuse, neglect, and/or exploitation. Information is shared during these task force meetings that can help respond and prevent financial exploitation of caregivers and the older adults they care for. Information such as the Women's Institute for Secure Retirement, or WISER. They have a financial caregiving hub. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also has helpful information for financial caregivers. Many financial institutions are also very involved in the fight against financial exploitation and have their own financial hubs. And I know that the Philadelphia Task Force has several of these financial institutions on it. So I'd like to briefly discuss a few ways to protect yourself and loved ones from elder financial abuse. First, know the risk factors. Two largely known risk factors are social isolation and cognitive impairment. We at NAPSA have researchers and other allied professionals who are interested in looking into these risk factors and how to best address them. We even have a social impact filmmaker interested in producing a documentary surrounding APS and the various forms of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. Secondly, don't succumb to pressure. Take your time. So many of the scam artists tell us that the time is now. You don't want to miss this opportunity. If it sounds too good to be true, it typically is. NAPSA hosts monthly scam advice calls and other webinars to disperse information regarding the latest and greatest in scams. Sadly, there's more than enough material each month. And lastly, prevention is indeed the best course of action, and involving your financial team in your affairs can provide extra layers of checks and balances. Planning is by far the smartest thing we can all do. Have those difficult conversations and consult your legal advocates, like the ones on the Philadelphia Financial Exploitation Prevention Task Force. Again, thank you for inviting me to present such important information in honor of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And I commend the members of the Philadelphia Financial Exploitation Prevention Task Force for the great work that they're doing for our older Philadelphians. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Jen for sharing that. And finally, I have recorded a piece regarding the issue. We have a lot of questions. I get a lot of questions regarding powers of attorney and how to use powers of attorney and what's involved. So we're going to share that recorded message now. afternoon. This is Dana Goldberg. I'm the legal director at SeniorLAW Center. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to best protect yourself from being exploited and what legal documents might help protect you. Before we get started, let me just talk a little bit about SeniorLAW Center. We are a nonprofit legal services agency. We've been in existence for over 43 years. And we operate the Senior Law Helpline here in Pennsylvania, where people over the age of 60 and who are Pennsylvania residents can call us to get assistance. In addition, we do brief service and extended representation in Philadelphia, Bucks, Montgomery, Delaware, and Chester counties. We serve about 10,000 people every year through both our direct services and also through our educational programs like today, where we're reaching out to you to give you information on how to best protect yourselves. In terms of the actual brief service and direct representation work that we do, we cover a whole bunch of different areas. We assist older adults in housing issues, both if you're a tenant or a homeowner. We represent grandparents raising grandchildren or great-grandparents raising grandchildren. We handle consumer issues that either deal with property, home repair contractor fraud. We provide defense against guardianship cases. We give advice regarding pension rights. And then finally, we have a very extensive practice in dealing with elder abuse and financial exploitation, as well as preparing what we call advanced life planning documents, which are simple wills, financial powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney, and living wills. So for today, where we're talking about preparing for financial decisions, we often get to the issue of, why don't I want to think about this topic? I don't want to talk about if I were to get ill and I couldn't pay my bills. I don't want to talk about end of life decisions. I don't want to even think about who's going to help me. And I certainly don't want to think about preparing a will. And I understand that these are difficult topics and people don't want to think about this. Not thinking about it, though, can put you in jeopardy. So I urge you to pay attention to what I'm talking about, have a conversation with your support system, and then, if possible, reach out to an attorney or to our office or one of the other legal services offices and go ahead and prepare. It will protect you and it will give you options, and that's a good thing. So whom should you talk to before deciding about preparing documents or what you should do? So for those of you who have active family members and people in your family that you trust, sit down, have that conversation. Have that conversation about, what would happen if you became ill, or you were no longer able to communicate, or you're no longer able to make decisions. Whom would you want to pay your bills? Whom would you want to make decisions about keeping up the property and paying your property taxes or paying your rent, and making those ultimate financial decisions? For those of you who don't have family, do you have family by choice? Do you have friends that are there that you could rely on? What is your active circle? And then have a conversation. And you should have a conversation with the people that you think you might want to empower or have that power should something happen to you, and find out if they would be willing to take on that responsibility. So what if you don't do anything, and what if you get sick? That's not a good situation. If you were to fall ill and you could no longer communicate, or you no longer had the ability to make decisions, you've left no options in terms of somebody accessing your bank account, paying your bills, moving money if you needed to move money, providing financial information if you needed to get long-term care services brought in the home, or if you needed to go to a long-term care rehab facility. And ultimately what would happen is somebody, which could be the hospital, would file for a guardian to be appointed. You've had no input whatsoever in terms of who that person would be. Could be a stranger that's on the list of people who provide these services. And they are people that didn't know you before you were ill or before you could make decisions. And that's not a situation that most of my clients or most people that I know would prefer. They'd prefer to name the people that can make those decisions for them, that know what their values are and how they live their life and what they would want for themselves. In order to do that, though, you have to prepare for that. So we're going to talk about is a document that's called a power of attorney. And there's two types of powers of attorney. There's a healthcare power of attorney, which names somebody that if you can't communicate or you can't make decisions, would make healthcare decisions for you. We're not going to talk about that type of power of attorney today. What we're going to talk about is the financial power of attorney today. And this is a document that gives another person the power to handle your financial matters. However, you're not just blanket giving away your powers. The law states that as long as you are capable of making decisions and you're able to communicate those decisions, you should have the power to make those decisions. The power of attorney is supposed to be in place so that the person you name can act if you can no longer act. So that's the important. It's in addition to you. You're supposed to be able to have a say and continue to make decisions when you're legally capable. So let's talk a little bit about agents under power of attorney. So under the power of attorney, it's a document you write, and you're called the principal. You're the person writing the document, and then you're naming somebody that will have that power, and that person is called the agent. And you can actually spell out what the powers that they have for making financial decisions. You can say they have the power to pay bills, they have the power to sign checks, they can buy or sell property, and those powers can be broad or limited. You should name someone you trust, and you can also name alternates. That way, if the person that you named is not able or is unwilling to make those decisions, you've already thought about that and you've named somebody who would do that instead. And the important thing to know is that the agent is what's called a fiduciary. So legally, they're under an obligation to use your money for your benefit. They cannot commingle funds. They have to keep detailed records. If somebody asks for an accounting of everything, they have to provide that, and the court can hold them legally responsible if they handle your funds inappropriately. Do agents abuse their powers? Yes, sometimes they do, and sometimes they use the principal's money for their own benefit. So there are ways you can protect yourself after you write the document. So as long as you're capable of watching over the agent and watching over your accounts, you should continue to do that. If the agent is helping you to do certain things, you can demand that the agent keep you informed, that the agent provide you receipts, that the agent account for everything that's spent. And there are some times where you can grant limited authority to another third party to sort of act as they can't do anything on your accounts, but they can watch over that. And I believe some of my colleagues have talked about that, especially from the brokerage firms. So they're what's called a trusted individual. So you may want to talk to your financial institution about whether you could set that up so there's somebody else monitoring what's going on and what the agent is doing. What about if I write the document and I change my mind, or I find out the agent is doing something wrong? You always, as long as you have legal capacity, you always have the right to revoke that document. It does need to be revoked in writing. And then we always, when we revoke something, we always recommend that the revocation be mailed to the agent so that they have notice they no longer have that power, and that that revocation is provided to the financial institutions. Where would you keep this document? Please never keep the document in a safe deposit box because you actually have to have the document. The agent would need that document to provide them access to a safe deposit box. If it's in there, obviously they can't get it. So it should be in a safe place, preferably a fireproof box in your home, and you'll need to let the agent know where that's located so that if in fact they need to use the document, they have access to it. What if you go to the bank and the bank says that you have to use the bank's form for a power of attorney? So this is absolutely not the rule. I highly recommend that if you're going to write a power of attorney, you speak with an attorney, you have the attorney prepare that document. It's a powerful document, and so you really want to have the advice of the attorney and make sure you understand what you're including in that. And then the banks must accept a valid power of attorney prepared, and it does not have to be on a bank's form. Some people say, well, why do I need to have a financial power of attorney if I can just put somebody else on my account? So there are people who will choose to do that, but I want you to be aware that with joint accounts, there are some things that can happen. Joint accounts belong to both account holders. So the other account holder can withdraw or move money without your knowledge, without your permission. This is legally allowed. There's no way I could pull back funds from that. You're granting that authority over whatever money's in the account belongs to both joint account holders. The other thing is that the account potentially could become liable if the other account holder has debt and they are subject to debt collection, and then you have to be concerned about whether your funds are going to be pulled for some sort of debt for the other person. So again, I would caution you and think very carefully before adding somebody to your account. Finally, I just want to tell you that, I gave just a very general overview. I highly recommend that you speak with an attorney to discuss your particular situation and writing documents to prepare in the event that you do get ill or you can't communicate. And I've put up here how to contact SeniorLAW Center. And if you're interested in our services or to get referred to where you can get services. Thank you very much. And the more you prepare, the more you protect. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, so I want to thank everyone who participated and recorded for all that helpful information. I realize we're at 5 o'clock, but we are here, and we not only have the members of the panel who prepared video presentations, but we have representatives from some of the retail banks and also from Older Adult Protective Services here from the Philadelphia Corporation for Aging. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. You can put it in the chat, and we'll be happy to direct your question to one of the panels. I'm not seeing any hands right now. Okay, I had one question in terms of what type of attorney should you go to, to discuss these information. So it's known in the law as somebody who specializes in trust and estates. And you might think, oh, I don't have an estate. I just have, my Social Security coming in, or maybe my house. Yeah, that's the legal term for all of your assets and preparing and all of that. So that's the type of attorney. You sometimes see people that advertise as an elder law attorney. So, that can mean different things. So please, when you approach somebody, interview that person before you meet with them. What are their specialties? Do they specialize in these documents? Are they, do they handle estates afterwards? So that's sort of to answer that question. Okay. There's also really good, so Linda Johnson, one of our task force members, just put in where to report internet crimes to. And the link is right there. Any other questions that people have?
While we give everyone a chance to think or type if they have any, I just wanted to remind everybody that the slides and recording of the presentation and some of the individual presentations will all be made available tomorrow, and we will, whatever email address you had used to register for the presentation, that is where we'll send the print materials referenced and the links that were on the slides, as well as the slides and recordings themselves. If you have any trouble with getting any of this information, if you can, feel free to email me directly. I'll put my email address in the chat, but it is tjcasey, C-A-S-E-Y, @upenn.edu. I'll put that in the chat right now. And thank you, Dana, so much for moderating today.
I'm not seeing any questions coming through, Terry.
If we have no questions, then I think we are good to close it out. But I will also add that if people do think of things after, you can feel free to send those questions along via email, and I'll direct them to the proper person. We can include some of those responses in our recap email as well.
All right, great. Then I just want to thank everybody, and please, take your time. You're going to get these materials, review everything, but the important part is don't put it off. Think about it, that if you walked out of your house today and you were struck by a car or a bus, who would be there? Who's named? How would I know? How would I know? How would the bank know? How would any of the individuals that just spoke to you know who's empowered to make those decisions? Who knows you? Whom we can contact on your behalf? Really, really important. I know it's hard, but I urge you to do it. Thank you again to all of my esteemed colleagues for your presentations, and I wish everybody well, and that nobody has to contact me about abuse or financial exploitation. Take care.